You know, something that bothers me probably as much or more than anything else is when there is a problem that it seems like you cannot figure out the solution to it. I struggled with this a lot in high school when I was doing algebra. You know, it seemed like we got a lot of problems thrown at us, and I was like, there's literally no answer to this problem. But the teacher always seemed to figure it out, and kind of left me hanging there trying to figure it out on my own. But we're going to talk about a problem that it almost seems like as if it's overwhelming, as if that it is beyond fixing. And that is the drug epidemic that we're dealing with in the United States, and especially here in the state of Kentucky. So we know that states that seem to have a population that is more poor, not as financially stable, tends to have more drug use as well. And that has changed over time because every demographic is faced with this problem. But West Virginia borders us. Here in Kentucky, Eastern Kentucky, the opioid crisis hit them extremely hard. And I doubt there's probably nobody, if you sit down and thought about it, nobody that would be able to say that they don't have somebody in their life, a friend of a friend, a family member that's not affected or touched by the drug epidemic. And then just in the last 8 years, 10 years, you know, we started hearing more about fentanyl and what is going on with it. And it has become the leading cause of death for men ages 18 to 45. So within a few years of coming on the scene, becoming known, now it is the leading cause of death for men when they are in their prime in the United States of America. And it absolutely blows my mind that we hear so little about solutions. We hear a lot about the border. We hear a lot about fentanyls pouring over the border and pouring into our country and coming through Mexico and coming from China and, you know, all those different aspects of it. But the fact is that it is killing young men in America in their prime at a rate higher than anything else. So why is this not a priority for people, for government, for communities, for churches? Why is this not a priority? And it doesn't mean it's not for people. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that you would think there would be more urgency around this.
Maybe because it's tied to money.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. But when you think about the money that's associated with it, it's a lot of it is out of the country. So through Mexico, you know, they're making money on it. Through China, they're making money on it.
It's not like they're paying taxes on it, you know.
Exactly. That we know of.
Yeah.
But it is something that...
So there's not a lot of money being made in the United States off of...
By the government. There is a lot of money being made.
Okay.
So 106,000 people died from drug overdoses in 2021. That was the highest number that had ever been recorded in a single year. And fentanyl was involved in 70% or is involved in 70% of all overdose deaths. Between 2019 and 2021, overdose deaths involving synthetic opioids increased by 56%. So it has definitely been the killer drug. And what I have seen, and I haven't talked about this a lot, but we have the privilege to direct a men's home that's for transitional living, faith-based, try to get people in that need stability in their life and help them, get them on their feet and get them a job. But the need in a lot of those areas revolves around drug problems. So a lot of the men that we get in are coming out of jail because of drugs or coming off the street because of drugs. And it has gotten to the point that there's really no such thing as a functioning addict. We used to hear about that back in the day. People would do drugs and they would go to work and people knew that they were off, but they functioned. They went to work. They came home. Maybe they didn't have a great life, but they made it until, whatever happened in their life. It's not like that anymore. It's so potent. It's so strong that they cannot function. And so it either takes them to the point that it totally removes most all consciousness or it kills them.
I think whenever you think about solutions to big problems, then, and this is a massive problem,
Right.
it has a lot of moving parts, global, as Brother Josh was saying, it's manufactured in China at an astronomical rate or an exponential rate. It continues to grow, and then sold to the cartels in Mexico. It's big business for them. It's big business for China, and they don't have any incentive to stop it because it weakens the United States, the population of the United States, which they're all for. The weaker United States, the stronger China gets, at least in their estimation. So it is a massive problem. I think that President Trump has said something that people overlook all of the time because they're like, that's too simple of a solution. But he has always said, as it pertains to alcohol and cigarettes, then he said, you never get addicted if you don't try it the first time.
Right.
And nobody has ever really, on the governmental level, and again, we're talking about a societal problem that we're trying to solve with the government. So it's going to be inefficient. But the simple place, if the government is going to solve a problem, they have to start at the simple solution first and begin to work from there. So that would be, I'm not saying that would solve the whole problem, but if our stance as a nation was, don't take drugs the first time and you won't have a problem with it ever in your whole life if you don't take them. If that was really the focus of all of our outreach programs and things like that, and then we built from there, that's at least something that you could measure.
Yeah.
So when I was in high school, before I moved to Kentucky, there was a big push for just say no to drugs. If you bought candy and you lifted the box, it was there. It was on billboards. They did campaign things in different schools and had meetings like in the gym, almost like you would have an after school rally. And there would be police officers and just different people in the community. And it was a huge push everywhere. And it was a thing. And, you would go to offer somebody something. They're like, just say no to drugs, no matter what it was, because it was so common. And it kind of put a fear in a lot of kids my age because they told how dangerous it was, what could happen. They gave statistics. They told, like, if you just tried it one time, you might be that person. And I feel like my age group, we were really educated about what could happen if we tried drugs. And I don't see that push as much anymore.
No, I agree that we don't see that. I was thinking about what you said about the government involved in it, and I tend to always think that the government's going to mess anything up that they get involved in. But this issue specifically, it's costing our economy $750 billion a year, $750 billion that is costing our economy. And so back when there was the Just Say No campaign, there were tax dollars that were spent. They were used to be able to let people know the effects of drugs. People went into schools and talked about it. Police officers did a lot of that. And some of that stuff still happens today. But this is the thing, is you do have to get people to the point that they never tried. You want them to either be afraid of it or to come to the point they have enough knowledge that they know I should never do this, whatever the cause or reason may be that they don't try it. But in the same turn, you have to understand that it is pouring over the border.
Right.
So why is there pushback of closing the border when we know that the leading cause of death for young men in their prime in America
Right.
is coming through that avenue primarily?
It's gotten to the level of a crisis is really what it's gotten to, and you could talk about, like you're talking about, the $700 billion that's healthcare cost, probably things like, jail housing and all of these things that it costs the state to house people that are arrested. There's all kinds of issues that arise from this problem. Maybe we can review a little bit. I'm doing this from memory, so it might not all be exactly right, but it's pretty close. How we got here. Because it wasn't like what you're talking about whenever y'all were in high school, then it was drugs were a problem, but they weren't as big of a problem, weren't as prevalent of a problem. First of all, just say no to drugs, the liberals hated that.
Yeah.
And they called it the war on drugs, and they said it's a total failure. If you talk to extremely liberal people today, they'll say it's a total failure. They have taken that mindset so far that in places like Oregon and some places of Washington, that they've decriminalized all drugs, anything. And
some are reversing their policies,
yes,
right?
they're having to. Because
in Oregon,
of
I know. I think I read that because it's not working out too well for them.
But think about how that mindset, has kind of filtered throughout the country. You have a whole section of, especially kind of the elitist, group, the media and all that stuff, that, well, drugs aren't really that bad. They wanted to be able to do their party drugs and all of this stuff. Really a massive push to decriminalize marijuana. To someone that's 16 years old, if you say, if you go to Florida, then marijuana is legal, they don't know that. If somebody's never taken drugs, they don't know the difference between marijuana and heroin.
Yeah.
They don't know the difference. I'm saying if they don't have any education about it.
Right.
It's just drugs to them. So you have opened a door to something already that whenever you legalize marijuana, whenever you legalize, alcohol in a community, you open the door to substances that are addictive.
Right.
And you embrace those as a community. Just by the presence of those addictive substances, other people are going to engage in other things.
Yeah.
That's just how it's going to go. So how did we get so prevalent? It is a societal issue as to why we got to the point where we are. Definitely influenced by political figures. I would say for sure that they bear the blame of it. But you're trying to unscramble eggs sometimes. So whenever you're trying to do that, you're not going to get the scrambled eggs unscrambled and back in the egg. You have to think outside of the box in order to make something happen. The first thing that you're talking about shutting the border down. If you're going to shut the border down, you got to lock it down.
Yeah.
You can't just close it to 1 million people, because the cartels have completely changed their business model around over border crossings. They charge for border crossings and they traffic drugs across the border. That's their whole business model right now. They have
and children.
Yes. Yeah. And traffic children. They are equipped like small militaries. That's how much money they've made. It's billions and billions of dollars every year. I mean, stuff that would put the guy from Colombia, what was his name? They made a TV show about him.
Yeah.
The Narcos guy.
I remember who you're talking about.
Oh my goodness. It just slipped me.
Escaped from prison a few different times.
Yeah. Like a famous drug dealer. I'll remember it in a little bit, or Google it on my phone or something. But the amount of money that they make every year puts him to shame. Absolutely puts him to shame. You have to cut off their flow of income.
Right.
And I really think this next administration is really focused on that. There are people, Dan Crenshaw, even though I don't agree with him on a lot of stuff, he at least has...
Me neither, but go ahead.
He at least has had conversations with people.
I'm sure he's listening in.
Yeah, probably not. His we can't get distracted by him right now. But he's had conversations with people about really solving this and what it takes. He's had people from Mexico on his podcast to talk about how things, went downhill there. And it's a twofold problem there. How the government was corrupted by the cartels and all this stuff. It's a massive global problem.
Yeah.
But one thing that you can say, and we try to focus on that in this podcast, is what can you do right now?
Yes.
Right.
Don't ever try it.
That's right.
And make sure your kids don't ever try it, and teach your children.
And this is what happens. So basically, a couple grains of salt, that's about the size of enough fentanyl that it takes to kill you. 2 kilograms, sometimes less. 22,000 pounds come across the border, was seized at the border in 2023. So we have no idea what actually came across. And I had a mother come in and sit down with me in Frankfurt one time, and we were talking about this specific issue. And this was the story that she told me. She said that her son played sports, he played basketball, that he was very good at what he did, that he was a clean young man. He didn't mess with drugs. He didn't drink alcohol. He worked out constantly. He was very concerned about his physical makeup and staying physically fit for basketball. He had aspirations to play in college. And she said that he tweaked his back in practice one day, and a teammate that was there heard him talking about it, and he said, "Hey, I've got a pain pill that will help your back. Just cut it in half and take it." And it looked just like a Percocet that you would get from a pharmacy. And he had no idea that the young boy had actually bought this through Facebook or somewhere. I can't remember. It was a social media that he made the deal, bought
TikTok
these.
did a lot of that.
Illegal. And the young man took it, half pill, first time he ever used, wasn't using it to get high, wasn't using it because he wanted to be a drug user, had fentanyl in it, it killed him, 17 years old. And, she sat there, and when you hear somebody tell you that, you're like, how in the world would you have stopped a problem like that from taking place?
Well, let's start, first of all, where it's made.
Yeah.
Because, that's where everything starts. It's made in China.
Right.
The reason that it's made in China is because they've developed processes to make it so cheap that, they can make, hundreds of thousands of pounds, ship it over. And it doesn't matter if 22,000 pounds is seized at the border. It's so cheap to make now compared to what it was.
And for people that don't know that, just hear this talked about on the news or whatever, there is legal fentanyl.
Right.
It's used in the medical field, most time for severe pain, surgeries, things of that nature. So,
but you don't need that much.
Correct.
You know what I'm saying? They know what they're doing as far as. And so the first question, and I know, everybody in DC is so smart and they have all the foreign policy figured out and they know how to do everything, but they haven't been able to solve anything for, almost 3 decades. So, I know that people get off, well, you don't know what you're talking about. We're trying to talk about how to solve a problem. What are you willing to sacrifice with China in order to get them to stop making fentanyl?
Right.
That's your first question from my perspective, I would say. You have to look at the people that are dying in your country and say, see how much money you're spending, almost $1 trillion a year. Is tariffs going to do it? Is threats going to do it? Is arming Taiwan going to do it? What do you have to do?
What would it take to make you care enough to do whatever it took to fix it? You mentioned something the other day about the equivalency of a plane crashing every day. And
I can't remember what that statistic was, but
it's over 100. So I think it's 165 or something was the number that was used, the approximate number of people that die of overdoses every day. That if a plane in the United States of America crashed with 160, 180 people on it
every day,
and the
what
next
would you
day,
do?
It happened again. And the next day it happened again.
Yeah.
What would happen?
Right.
We already know what
Did you
would
say
happen.
it was 600,000? that what you said? That died of overdose?
No, it was 100 and
Okay. Yeah, that's
6,000.
pretty close then.
Yeah.
So yeah. So what would you do? We've already seen some failures mechanically that didn't cause planes to crash, that they shut whole airlines down.
Two planes did.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And so if this was happening every day, people would take notice.
Right.
They would stop what they were doing and they would figure it out. They would do everything within their power to fix it. So what does it take to open people's eyes to get them to do something about it?
A lot of times it takes it touching them personally.
Yeah.
Sometimes, as far as there's a lot of mothers now who are active in speaking and making people aware because their children have died.
Right.
And so now, not that they didn't care before, but now it's a big deal. Their child has died.
I think this is a great example again of the disconnect between the population of the country and the establishment in DC. There is a massive disconnect there where they do not understand our problems. And I think that is part of the problem. First of all, a lot of the senators, congressmen, and all that stuff make money off of China.
Yeah.
Either through businesses or shipping companies or sitting on boards of companies that, advise Chinese companies where to drill in Africa or whatever it is. They make too much money off of China for them to, take a stand against them. So that's one positive thing I think about what we're seeing in the national government right now, is that they really want to take a buzzsaw to a lot of the issues that are in DC. That's a major problem there. But we're talking about, again, thousands and thousands of mothers on social media. They're in groups, all of this stuff. What effect do they have on DC?
Yeah.
They come in there and they talk to them and they say, oh, we care about your problem so much. But they go to committee. This is such a difficult problem. Never solve anything.
Right.
Never solve it. And it shows like that our problems do not affect their mind or do not affect their emotions at all.
Yeah.
Whenever it really comes down to it, they do not have the urgency that thousands upon thousands of mothers around our country have, because they've lost their son.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
The senators and the congressmen's kids, they, get the good drugs from the good areas of town or whatever. And like Hunter Biden, he's on a laptop,
by the way,
smoking crack.
By the way,
pardoned.
Aaron called it here on the Josh Calloway podcast that Hunter Biden was going to get a pardon with the turkeys.
And he did.
And he did.
Yeah,
so
that turkey got a pardon.
It was breaking news here, and he did get a pardon. But no, you're right. They do not care, which leads me to the point that they are not the answer. They can be a part of the solution, and they should be. Mm-hmm. We need to hold them accountable to be. But we have, Angie and I mean, she still communicates with mothers who have been through this over and over again with their children, that they every night during the night expect to get a text or a phone call that their child has overdosed in their 30s, in their 40s. And it's like, if they do good for 2 months, she'll get a text from the mom of just being overjoyed about the fact that their son has been clean for 2 months out of the last 20 years, know? And I get it. Like we walk through this with people, and I do get it, but they're left with no hope there.
Right.
And you're right. So we have China that is coming from. We know that they're importing it into Mexico, and then Mexico is trafficking it into. And you have to deal
with it. You have to deal with the cartels too. So that's another thing that Dan Crenshaw has talked to a lot of people about, and President Trump has really made. They're kind of keeping it on the down low, but they do have a plan in place to try to deal with the cartels. They've talked about using special forces against them. Of course, I read a liberal article the other day I don't even know where it was, but it just said, the special forces of the U.S. probably don't want to go up against the cartels. They're probably a match for them. And I'm like, I don't know if you've met some special forces guys. I've done work for some special forces guys. they don't match, there's nobody that matches them.
No.
Right.
And they don't go in for to exchange equal gunfire.
Right.
Right. They come in
No, they're chomping
overloaded
at the bits to fix
by surprise.
problems.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they're ready to do it.
Yes.
And I believe that should definitely take place. If you can't cut China, at least you can do something there. And then it comes across the border. You can do something there.
Right.
And then it gets into the cities, and there's decriminalization. There's all this stuff. So that's basically 4 main fronts on a global scale.
Yes.
And we're not addressing any of them.
Right.
That's that's what I'm trying to say.
Right.
It has become such a massive problem that it is threatening the security and the safety of our country. And constitutionally, our government is required to help us with that.
Right.
Most of the time, like you, I want the government to stay out of it. But they've
they have-
messed it up
our
so
safety,
bad.
It is a responsibility of government. It's in the Constitution.
And it's not just dangerous for people who take the drugs like you're talking
Right.
about. It's become dangerous for people that work at the jail that we go talk to
Right.
and we help in a jail ministry. They have to be extremely careful about what they do. You've seen videos of police officers just by, taking a breath and somebody
That's right.
having to be Narcaned. It has become a massive dangerous issue, even for people that don't even know that they're around it. You know
Right.
what I'm trying to say there.
Well, and it's the illegal use of fentanyl where there's the danger, so much danger, because I think they said they had strips that
Right.
you can test
Right.
to make sure, but they're not always accurate.
Mhm.
And they're trying to provide that. They're trying to provide Narcan like in a vending machine and
Right.
doing all that they can.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because that's kind of where I've heard somebody make the statement the other day, and I've probably made it myself. I don't know, that said you can't incarcerate someone out of addiction, and I fully understand what they're saying, and so there is a push pull in society. I see it in the legislature of how do you deal with somebody in addiction versus dealing with somebody that is actually peddling or dealing drugs.
Right.
And how do you recognize that difference and get the person help that needs help? And I've said it. I've told men that have come through around our home and everything else. I've told them, I said, God help the person that introduces one of my kids to that stuff. And so, and people make choices. I just say that
Right.
from my heart, and how much I care about my kids, and how I believe if somebody is willing, knowing what it will do, and willing to give that to somebody else, there is accountability there.
Let's take I don't know if you remember this program or not. I think it was 3 years ago, maybe. I can't remember if it was Andy Bashir or Greg Fisher. I can't remember which one. But they had a program around Louisville where they were paying drug dealers or drug traffickers like $30,000 that had gotten arrested. They would send them out, and then they would pay them in Kentucky like $33,000 or something like that. That number is sticking in my head for some reason, per year, to be like snitches for their the drug dealers,
Yeah.
And what ended up happening is they just snitched on the people that were competing with them for the drug trafficking and getting them arrested and taken off the streets, and they were making a killing on it. You cannot manage this problem. It's not a manageable problem. There's no way to manage it. We've tried to manage it, and it continues to grow exponentially. Yeah. So all management options as far as the legislature goes. So let's take addicted people in jails. This is something that you and I both interact with a lot. Addicted people in jails. The first thing that I would think would be a priority is to make sure whenever they go into the jail that they can't get any drugs while they're in there.
Yes.
That would be the first priority.
They can a lot of times.
Yes. So the first piece that I would say, if I'm saying what is the first thing that we can try to do, make sure that there's no drugs in jails. What do you need to do that? I have no idea, but it seems like there could be a solution to that one.
And this is the problem with that specific issue, is that nobody that is on drugs is going to make the decision to get help
Right.
unless they get clean, get
Right.
their mind clear. And we have to look at some legislation there. I've had this discussion with our local sheriff here, and a lot of times they'll arrest them, they'll be high, and they take them to jail. Before they can get their paperwork filed, they've already bonded out, already got out of jail. They're still high, or they are detoxing, so they're looking for something else. And because of that, it's just a never-ending cycle. So we have the drugs that have to be dealt with. We have people that are addicted that have to be dealt with. And then we have people that are that are ruining people's lives that have to be dealt with. The law was changed in Kentucky a few years back. Representative Chris Fugate, I believe, carried the bill that required, if you were trafficking fentanyl over a certain amount, that you were required to spend 85% of your time in jail before you were eligible for parole. Just trying to get tougher on that. But we've not seen a decrease.
What is an average sentence for someone who is a drug dealer? If somebody gets caught and they are known to sell drugs, deal drugs, what is the average?
You have two problems there. The first problem is that most of the court system is very backed up still. It takes a long time for them to get through. And there's a lot of people, even if they're dealing drugs, whatever, that they will offer lower sentences for a plea deal. So for instance, let's say they were trafficking marijuana. Then they would say, we're going to plea you down to first degree possession or something like that. They get them behind bars for a while. They don't have to go to the court system. They don't have to, spend all this time, 2 years or whatever, trying to get their trial done. And they get in and get their time started.
It happens all the time. And it even, we see it in pardons. Whenever pardons take place, a lot of times somebody may have committed more egregious crime.
Right.
They plea bargain down to certain charges, and then they get pardoned for those charges.
Because 20 years later, they say, well, I just had a possession charge
or
whatever
exactly.
it was.
And so we've seen that happen. But again, you cannot incarcerate somebody out of drug addiction,
right,
but you can get their mind clear and have options for them to be able to get help. And I've always said this, that I believe that Christians or churches, you could just sum it up with churches, communities, and compassionate people get more done in this particular area than any other government, any government entity.
Yes.
Because
at a higher success rate.
Right. At a higher success rate.
It's still not high though.
No, no, it's not high, because it is so entangling that when they get addicted, it takes a miracle, a literal miracle most of the time. And that's God working in their heart.
I talked with somebody specifically, and I said that was, did drugs, was an addict and had been for years. And I said, what would get your attention while you are in the process of being on drugs? Because he would be clean for a little bit. And he said, when I am doing drugs, when I'm actively doing drugs, he said, I don't care about my mom. He said, I don't care about my wife.
Right.
He said, I know that. He said, it don't matter. He said, they can cry, they can be sick. And he said, that is the main focus. He admitted that during a time of being clear-headed.
Right.
So then I said, why are you going to go back?
Yeah.
And they are chasing this feeling that's never going to satisfy.
There's another problem here too, which this whole situation is just problems. That's
right.
And everybody can find the problem, but how do you find solutions? That's what we're talking about. But one thing too, I've noticed, we've seen guys come here from other states, whatever it is, and they don't have a cell phone. They don't have, all this other stuff. And it seems like within an hour of leaving here, they found some place that has the drug that they want.
Yes.
It is too prevalent. That's
They
for sure a
know,
problem.
yes.
And it's like they can pick up on it, but it's everywhere.
Oh, yes.
I have lived in
we're 45 minutes from a Walmart, Supercenter Walmart. You know what I'm saying?
Well, we've lived in Brett County for, almost 30 years.
Yeah.
I've never had anybody offer me drugs.
Mm-mm.
Not one time.
Yeah. But you've seen a lot of people that do
But
them.
I'm saying, there are people
Mm-hmm.
that are from out of state. And you, like you said, within moments, they find them within 7 minutes.
Yeah.
And I've lived here years.
They
and
have
I'm
little secret hand signals or something.
Or something. And it's everywhere.
Yeah.
The opportunity.
So definitely the prevalence of it, I think that the government could be involved in.
Yeah.
The government, you were talking about that. The one thing that is guaranteed to work is salvation.
Yes.
That's the only thing guaranteed to work.
Right.
That's the message of hope that I have to take to them into the jail, most of the time. Yes. You can be delivered. You don't have to be an addict anymore. That's what Christ can give you, but most of them can't take that step. A lot of them still love the drugs like you're talking about. So whenever we're talking about this from a national perspective or from a state perspective or a state legislature, what can you focus on to where you can help the problem instead of helping to find a solution instead of helping continue? So they moved in within, I don't know, a couple of miles of where I work. Then they moved in a methadone clinic, and this was another government solution to this.
Yeah.
Let's give them something that's not, I don't even necessarily know what methadone is, but it's kind of like a substitute for meth, and they're supposed to wean them off of there and all of this stuff. And I can't
Most
tell
of the time
you,
it doesn't happen.
the people that lived around there, they sold their houses. They got out of there because of the type of people that were hanging around. They were just using that as a substitute until they could find what they were really wanting.
Well, I know I've talked to young men that have come through our home, and they would be prescribed it. They would take it and sell it on
it
the
has street value.
and then buy drugs with it.
Yeah.
So they were actually using it to get more drugs.
And in the jail, then they get, now the big thing is Suboxone strips, which I can't remember what Suboxone is, but it's some kind of drug that's supposed to help you get off of the drugs.
Helps with opioids.
Opioids, yeah. So, but it is so easy to hide compared to everything else.
Yeah.
Right.
The jail that I go to on Monday nights is very, very strict and has one of the best success rates as far as finding drugs and getting them out and all this stuff. And stuff still gets past them every once in a while, because...
You brought up those clinics. I was thinking, I can't remember, it's been a few years back that Daniel Cameron, when he was Attorney General, entered into a lawsuit against some of the opioid companies, and we got nearly $1 billion here in the state of Kentucky because they were found liable for a lot of the addiction and the problems that Kentucky has dealt with. And that's another piece of it, the pharmaceutical side that has introduced people to these drugs. They said that OxyContin was like going to be the best pain medication because it wasn't addictive, right? And it literally captured millions of people.
They had the commercial. I don't know if you've seen that or not. I think it's back in the 90s, the OxyContin commercial. And all of the people in that commercial were talking about, I don't have back pain anymore, all this stuff. I saw a documentary on all of them, except for maybe one, ended up addicted to heroin or something like that.
Yeah.
Lost their jobs, lost their families, all of this stuff. So this is where, in my estimation, again, that we hit a wall.
Yeah.
We talk about all these other things that we're doing, China, Mexico, all this stuff. This, in my estimation, is the wall that we hit, and that is we are prescribed more drugs as a nation. It's like a massive water hose of just an absolute flow of drugs. The pharmaceutical companies benefit off of it, so there's no incentive for them to stop.
Right.
The doctors benefit off of it, so there's no benefit from it. There's no incentive for them to stop prescribing it. The people love the drugs that they're on. They're made for the people to love the drugs that they're on. So there's no incentive for them to quit. And it's like a factory of making addicted people.
Well, there's another piece to that, and I don't know anything about the lady. I haven't looked into it at all. But the concept of what she was saying makes a lot of sense now that I look back on it. She was talking about her son had died from an overdose. She said that he was in the hospital unconscious, and I can't remember. It was with 24 hours, I think, of him being in the hospital. They came to her and said that he pretty much was brain dead. Did she want to go ahead and end his life? And if she wanted to, that they would be able to use his organs and he could be an organ donor, right? And so she's like, no, I'm not ready to let him go. And she ended up staying at the hospital with him for 2.5 weeks. But
she said they came by every 12 hours.
Every 12 hours, they came to her and asked her, did she want to go ahead and unplug all the life support and let him go? And she kept prolonging it. And what she said is that I felt like I needed to give him the opportunity for a miracle. She's like, I believe God could do anything, and it was my responsibility as his mother. She said, I got to looking, and she said, it was unreal how many 40 and younger men were in there. And she said, everybody except her, of the men that were in there that were brain dead, went home after 72 hours. They did the honor walk, they donated the organs, and they passed away, And her point that she was making is it was fentanyl that her son was involved with, is that it has been the perfect brain dead drug. So it's an opioid, so it affects the respiratory system. You basically quit breathing, don't get oxygen to the brain, and you are brain dead, and then you die if you're not put on life support. It doesn't destroy your organs. And she had done some look into some of the companies. There's like 50 nonprofits in America that take these organs and then try to distribute them to people that need them. $2 million for a heart. And then the pharmaceutical companies are making, I think it was $25,000 to $50,000 per year per organ for the medication, because you have to be on medication to support the organ after a transplant that they're in. And she basically said, is it coincidence that this drug is pouring over the border, that nothing's being done about it, and that the most healthy among us are the ones that are dying at the fastest rate?
Right. And they're harvesting the organs,
taking their organs,
millions of dollars.
And she said, this has nothing to do with recipients.
Right.
If people have received them, that's awesome. And I think she said that she even had some family members that had received organs. But the point is that there are so many things that are involved in this problem that cause people not to want to fix it.
And then here is the thing that I've heard several times too, that comes at the end of all of this discussion, and we get to this point, and they say it's personal responsibility. So they say it's your job as an individual not to take drugs. And if somebody is going to take drugs and become addicted, and they die and their organs are used to help somebody else that hasn't done that, then, that's their fault for doing that.
Yeah.
And that's the point where a lot of people have gotten to, where they've ignored the problem, ignored any government solutions to the problem, try to help as many people as you can. But at the end of the day, their choice is their choice.
Mm-hmm.
And what are you going to do about that? Now, my personal belief is that, and it's not just a belief, I think there's plenty of evidence to back it up, is that the government's hands is, as you were saying, is not cleaning this
Right.
Yeah.
in their addiction. You know, some of these drugs is not because they're matched up with an addictive personality. It's those drugs will make you an addict, and it
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
matter what your personality is.
What did they say about fentanyl? How much more addictive and how much more potent it is than heroin and different things? It's a crazy.
Oh, yeah, 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine, I believe.
Yes, and so it's very powerful.
So, like my wife, whenever we go to, whenever she goes to have a baby, then they ask if they can give her narcotics, and she says no.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she takes, it's rough on her, but she takes aspirin and all this stuff, you know, and I'm not saying, you know, there's people that don't need that medication. They do, but as long as you can avoid it, you do.
Right.
Right.
But they offer it
Yes. Oh, yeah.
immediately as soon as we get there, before the whole process even starts, even though I'm sure the epidural is some kind of narcotic,
Yeah.
you know,
But
I'm saying,
it's
you
crazy,
know, after
though.
you get done is what
Yeah.
I'm
This,
saying.
this is the thing that we've dealt with, right? I've worked with a lot of veterans. I have a brother that was injured over in Afghanistan. And
Oh, we don't want to get into VA affairs, do we?
a lot of the problem that I see,
Perfect.
though, is that it seems like the people that actually need help by some type of narcotic are the most scrutinized and have the most trouble trying to get it, and they lapse, and they, you know, it's crazy. And then people that don't need it find a way, and there's always somebody out there that will make sure that they get it. And so, yeah, I get exactly what you're saying. There is absolutely a personal responsibility in this, but one thing that
I'm just saying that's where people have gotten to.
No,
I'm
you're
not saying
right.
that's how I'm.
Right.
you know,
Right.
No, I think that one thing that we can do, and we say this often on this podcast, and I'm going to consistently say it, is that we can affect our family.
Right.
We can warn our kids. We can warn our grandkids. We can teach them what is right. And if you've got to get them out of the school that they are in to keep them away from it, if you've got to get them out of a neighborhood that you live in, do whatever it takes to protect your family and raise them right, and raise them with the knowledge that they need to avoid it. And I would also say take them to church, introduce them to the Lord Jesus Christ, let God do a work in their heart. But we can do something about it in our circle of influence. I hate using that phrase, but anyway, with our family, you know, we have grandkids coming up now, and they're going to grow up in a different world than our kids grew up in. You know, the things that they're going to be exposed to. And I said at the beginning of the podcast that this is now touching every demographic. So you have rich people and poor people alike that are dealing with, that are addicted to some type of drug.
Do y'all remember whenever I was a teenager, then there were all these billboards up? I don't know if, but it's been forever since I've seen one. It was like before meth, after meth.
Yeah.
Or how long has it been since you've seen one of those? It's been, I went down to Georgia where my grandparents live, and I still remembered that same place where there was one. There's one still there, you know, but somebody's had to keep that up, you know. What happened to stuff like that? You know, that was, as a kid, so shocking. And I don't want to go, you know, like dive into my past or anything, but that had such an impact that even though I did all kinds of, you know, recreational substances and all this stuff, I was like, no, you don't ever want to do meth.
Yeah.
You don't ever want to do heroin. You know, that's not, I'm not saying it's any better than the other drugs, but for sure that has an impact on people, you know. And the school system, how long's it been since you've been in there and you've seen posters like that in the school system, or Dare, you know, Dare was what it was. And I know people made fun of that and they did all this stuff, you know, they took the drugs anyway, or wore their t-shirt and smoked and did all this. I understand that people took advantage of it, but that does have an impact on people.
And it does. It reaches kids, and it puts a thought in their mind, you know, to not do that.
And it has an impact on the culture of the country, you know. So that's stuff that, you know, maybe like local churches or whatever could buy a billboard that is something like that. You know, I don't know who may listen, but you know, maybe that could do something.
Right.
You never know what kind of impact that would have.
Well, Josh and I had even talked about driving the other day, and we were talking about incentive. You know, sometimes you need to incentivize certain things, and so we talked about what could you do to incentivize kids getting to a certain age, and then it be some kind of award or recognition or something that they made it that far without trying drugs,
Right.
and then 2 years later. So the crucial years, like, you know, 14, 16, and 18, because a lot of times if they make it to that point and haven't tried some of the harder drugs, they may not.
Right.
But, you know, the government can't necessarily do
How do you
that.
know that? Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But maybe communities
Mm-hmm.
could help young people and incentivize something. And, you know, you would have to put a lot of thought into it. Like people,
Right.
like a board would have to get together.
Well, and used to communities would, if somebody was a drug dealer in town or came around, they would take care of it. You know, and I'm not saying, you know, people crucify you today for saying that.
Yeah.
How dare you violate the rights of some, but parents took it seriously that someone was starting to come around town that might end up killing their children
Right.
with drugs.
Right.
You know, they actually took that seriously. It was part of the culture in, you know, in television. It was part of the culture in the community. People talked about it.
Mm-hmm.
My dad, whenever I was a kid, there was somebody that was growing marijuana that he knew. And he went to them and he said, I'm not trying to, you know, cause trouble. I know so-and-so. I know you're not going to get caught because of who else grows it in Breckinridge County. He said, but if one of my kids get around it, I'm going to kill you. You know, that's what he said. I don't know if we can say kill on YouTube or not.
Yeah.
But that was why that's how people thought then. You know, now people think, well, I can't do anything about it.
1 in 8 kids live
And
in
they
a-
will prosecute you if you do something about it, by the way.
Yeah. 1 in 8 kids live in
Good
a
Daniel
home
Penny.
with an addicted parent.
Yeah.
1 out of 8.
So that's what I was going to say too. What's different from when I was a kid to some kids now, they've grown up in that. That's
Right.
what do you do with kids that their earliest memories are of drugs or alcohol abuse, and you have infants. The
Mhm.
hospital is filled with addicted infants being born and
That's right.
being taken away from their
Yeah,
parents.
West Virginia has a hospital specifically for that, and they said it is absolutely atrocious to go in there and to listen and see these babies that are born addicts, born addicted, that they're trying to wean off and help them. It's unreal.
I have a family member that adopted a child that they had to do that and give them certain amounts every day to try to wean them off of it. I mean, brand new born.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
Well, yes, we've had family members that have done this, you know, somewhat of the same thing. And you don't even know sometimes the long-term effects
Right.
on those infants by
No,
those
that's
drugs.
right. No, we're just seeing that, and
Yes.
you know, different people that we've dealt with, that they're encountering new things consistently. My brother and his wife, which is my wife's sister, are dealing with a couple kids like that right now that they have adopted, and it's just something new constantly because of the after effects of this. But this is what we've done in our society is we have so normalized this as if that it's just part of our society. We got needle exchange programs, we got fentanyl test strips that, you know, are not completely accurate, but they might help. We have Narcan that is used to be able to resuscitate people if it's an opioid drug, and it has saved lives. It has kept people from dying, and it has prolonged the problem in the United States of America. And so if it was my kid that had been saved by by one of those things, I would be thankful, you know? So I'm not just saying that it's not the solution. It is not the solution.
So let me take those two thoughts that we've been talking about. The culture that we grew up in, that you grew up in, the things that I saw growing up. Don't do it. This is bad. There's a stigma against them. Now, nobody wants you to have a stigma against
Right.
drug dealers. You know, they're a victim, you know, all of this stuff. You have all of these support groups.
It's an illness.
Right, yes.
Is what they call it.
But there's a whole culture around it now. But the culture now and the culture then, they said that was morally wrong because you're stigmatizing people.
Yeah.
But which one works? That's really
Right.
the only thing that matters whenever it comes to a crisis this bad. And it's something that people aren't willing to do most of the time. But the only thing that matters is what works.
Yes.
That's it. It doesn't matter how you feel about it. It doesn't matter how your liberal friend feels about it. It doesn't matter how your Democrat buddy down the road says, well, we can't do this. What works?
Well,
That's all that matters. And I'm going to be honest with you. Most of those people that I have met, they have said, well, you can't stigmatize them or you can't do this. They do nothing to help them.
Right.
They've done nothing to help them.
No.
Whenever you need help, they're not there.
And you said it a little bit ago, but I will tell you what works is them meeting the Lord Jesus Christ. That does work. I have seen men that have knelt down at an altar that have been addicted for decades and have gave their heart to the Lord and get up and walk away free. Yeah. I've seen it happen. So we know that that can happen. But we also know that in our society, as a societal problem, that we have got to be doing what we can to help people. So if we're doing what we can with the transitional living home, we're trying to help men that need a place and that are willing to commit to getting help, we reach out to them and help them. We have our family that we can help in, we can work in, and teach, train, and scare, whatever we got to do to
affect everybody around you. Yeah.
And so affect who you can affect, help who you can help. And I think in legislation that we have to be careful in what we are doing to make sure that we are actually helping the problem.
For instance, whenever we talk about arrests for drug possession or trafficking, whatever it is, think about how much the culture and the attitude has changed, even over the past 10 years. You know, where it used to be, the answer would be, okay, arrest them, get them cleaned out, get them sentenced, make them spend some time, and they'll think about it again before they do it again. And now it is, get them out as soon as you can, because it's like it's immoral to keep them in the jail. Mm-hmm. That's how people view it. Well, you don't have a right to have them incarcerated that long for doing drugs. And it's almost like people don't see at all that that drug is killing that person.
Yes.
That jail might be the only thing that stands between them and death. I can't tell you how many men that have come through our services that have talked about they would be dead if they had not gotten put in jail. And here's the other thing, not to criticize or, I keep jumping on tons of stuff here, really, really passionate about this. But at the same time, you have people that are supposedly Christian, and they undermine everything that you preach whenever you go in there. Oh, no, you're just an addict. You're just going to struggle your whole life. They preach a salvation with no deliverance, a salvation that does not have the divine nature living in you. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like you are fighting everything on every side dealing with this. Yeah. And I know that you've dealt with, Miss Angie thinks of a lot of these men as like her sons, or treats them like that. Yeah.
It's just sad because they give up their family. They give up their opportunity for a career. They're so enslaved to it. There's one young man that I am thinking about, and he was behind a convenience store and overdosed. And we were, a different county from us, and we found out about it. We called the police, and they said, we don't want him. They called the hospital, and they said, we don't want him. So if nobody was really, he don't have family or anything. So if nobody was really going to raise a fuss about it or do something, he could have died that night. And I told Josh, I said, you need to go get him. Yeah. Because if that was my son, I don't want him dying behind a convenience store. They don't care. Right. But I think it's because it's so many.
Well, they said, but one specific place said there's 100 more like him out there, as long as he's not committing a crime as far as hurting someone, breaking into somebody's house.
Then just leave him.
But I will tell you this, is that if you want some good solutions, and I've done this and we have to do more of this, some good solutions for fixing this problem, some of the people that have the most knowledge about it is law enforcement.
Right.
Probably, and I heard a statistic about, I think it was 90+%, 90 to 92% of all encounters that they have with people revolve around this issue. It might be breaking an entry, but, they were high. It might be erratic driving. They were high.
Passing counterfeit bills like George Floyd.
Might be it might be a fight, but they know this problem.
Right.
And they see the effects of it, and it consumes most of all of their policing. This issue consumes most of their policing because they are addressing problems due to this problem.
Right.
And so I've had that discussion, and I think there are some things in policy that we can look at. I just know it's not the ultimate answer. The things that we have done in the past, the problem continues to grow. We had that nearly $1 billion of money, abatement money, and so that money's being invested back into ways to help people that are addicted, and we'll continue to watch that and do what we can to help people. But nothing can improve on you influencing the people in your world, in your life, in your circle. Nothing can beat that.
And definitely, and definitely the last 4 years we have been, every level of our federal government has been filled with people that make this problem way worse. They will not take, the Biden administration will not take the steps necessary to do what needs to be done about the drug crisis. And you saw that with the border. They just would not address it, know. So thankfully, hopefully, we have President Trump, and then we'll try to take care of things on that front. Us personally, the advice that President Trump gave is still the best advice. If you don't ever take it, you don't ever get addicted to it. Right. That's just how it works.
And that doesn't told mean his sons that, no drugs, no drinking, no smoking, every time they would leave his presence to go somewhere. But we have the truth. We know what the truth is. And so I think that us doing what we can in our world and what we can influence is what's going to make the difference for our communities. And if every community engages in that, we will make a difference. But my, I guess, admonishment to President Trump is keep your promise, shut the border down, let Tom Homan get to work and get all these criminals out of here that have been trafficking it. And
I don't think people understand, like this what's it called? Trinidad Agua or something like that. Them MS-13, like you have a career doing something, their whole career is drug trafficking and child trafficking and sex trafficking. That's their whole.
We've met some of these guys in prison.
Whole life. Yes,
we've met some of these guys in prison. They're doing it in prison.
That's what they've done their whole life.
They're making money from in there.
They're masterminds. Some of them are. Some of those guys, especially making so much money in prison, they're masterminds.
Yeah,
this is what they do. You have to take it seriously because they know more of how to traffic and do all that stuff than you know how to fix it. So get them out. Why are they here? I'm not trying to be, sound too simplistic, but I mean, they've taken over. I read something the other day. Where was that? Canada built nice residential housing, multifamily housing, apartment complexes, duplexes. They built them for illegal immigrants. They get to live there for free. Maybe it was New York. I can't remember. I've read so much stuff, They get to live there for free, have no idea, what their criminal history is, nothing. They've just turned it into a trafficking place.
Yeah.
And it's free. And you could not get the government to provide free housing for families that were bankrupted by the banking crisis in 2008 for nothing.
Look at the people in North Carolina that are still without
they're
housing.
living in tents.
Living in tents and motels. And
Biden just announced $1 billion to African countries because of natural disasters, but FEMA doesn't have any money. Again, government, I'm not saying government is the total solution, but government has been a massive problem.
Mm-hmm.
And they always are. That's just how.
Well, if you want to start helping this problem, look in your own backyard and fix what you can fix there. And we'd be interested in hearing if you have solutions or questions about this specific issue. Comment on this video, like it, share it, subscribe to our podcast channel. And we really want to get the truth out to people. We're interested in getting information to you. And if you have podcasts that you would like us to do a whole segment on, we'd be glad to entertain that. And we hope that the truth, which is what we try to tell, is the only thing we know that makes people free. So we hope that it keeps getting out. We want you to spread it around for us. Thank you for listening. God bless. Until next time.